The word is branching, because I'm taking Wartribes, my top-down, skill-based tribal management game, and splitting it in two. And my YouTube has branched into 3 separate channels. I have updates for combat, prototyping, the use of AI, new character model for both man and beast, and more in this devlog. Let's dive in. My full dream game, which I estimate will take 3 to 4 years to develop with all of the features I need for the core game, is going to be the first game I release. Now, conventional game dev wisdom says that your first game shouldn't be your dream game, but I always felt like that didn't quite apply to me, as I have my experience in the software industry and I know I have the right passion and drive to get it done, as long as I don't burn out.
This is fine.
But I did recently watch this interview with Chris Zukowski, who's a marketing expert in games, and he also talks about why your first game shouldn't be your dream game.
Okay, so my basic complaint for all indies out there is that you spend way too long working on your first game, or any game.
But he doesn't talk about quality of your first game, which is what I've often heard talked about and something I'm already confident in. Rather, he talks about building experience in release, marketing, and building up an audience through your first game. He also talks about which game genres are marketable and sell well, and he mentions horror as a standout here.
Those are excellent games, faster development time, and people love horror games.
But I'm not really interested in making a different game, especially not a small game. But he still convinced me that I wanted to do something first.
So I'm gonna try and make a prequel to my game. A single player horror survival tribe building game where you survive the dark nights against various animals and other cultists and stuff like that. And I think that way I can really reap the benefits,
while still maintaining the core essence of my dream game. I can then take the experience I get from releasing and marketing that game and use it for my main game. And I wanted horror elements in my game anyway, so I don't think any of the work I'll be doing is wasted. Now imagine pitch black nights. Huge anacondas swimming in the rivers, giant spiders chittering in the trees, ritualistic blood tribes down the valley, and perhaps something even more sinister. If I can do a good job with lighting, sound effects, and music, I think we can really create a scary game, even with the challenges of it being from a top-down perspective. The daytimes can serve as a break from the horror, and you get a chance to take a breath before you dive back in on the next night. Now I'll still be building up a strong foundation for the game that can support the full vision, but I don't have to make it so polished for this first release. I have been wondering why I haven't been able to find other developers taking this same approach. I really think it has potential, and I'm wondering if there's some pitfall I haven't thought about. As promised in my last devlog, I focused extensively on prototyping, especially around the combat system. As a foundation, I've set up configuration ini files that can have dozens of rules that determine how the game is played. I can then easily create sets of rules to try out, and even change individual settings at runtime. I have rules for cooldowns, stamina costs, aiming modes, as well as options for debugging and visuals. This has helped with some decisions, but it hasn't given me as much in the short term as I'd hoped. But I am sure it'll be an essential tool in the long term. As I've talked about earlier, I want my combat to be skill-based. And that, among other things, means you'll have to precisely aim your attacks in the XY plane. But I've also been experimenting with vertical offsets, so you can aim at precise locations on your enemy if you are skilled enough, and you can maybe hamstring your opponent or poke an eye out. I've taken inspiration from Prismatica, Kenshi, and other games, and I want you to be able to disable opponents in other ways than just killing them. But of course, you and your tribesmen will be subject to the same rules, and you might have an injured leg you need to take care of. Your tribesmen will be watching and learning from how you handle these situations, and that will help determine the culture and behavior of your tribe. I've found some issues with using screen space line traces directly, as if you're, for example, aiming at the head of an enemy and then missing slightly, you'll suddenly be aiming at the ground above your enemy and aiming in a completely different direction, which feels really bad. I've been experimenting with various ways to remedy this. One option was using a soft aim assist, but that turned out to be too handholdy for what I want. Instead, I've come up with a solution where when you're aiming at the ground, you're actually aiming 1.5 meters above it, which feels a lot smoother, and you can still do precise aiming when you're aiming at something important. But how this all plays out in real game scenarios and PvP is something I've yet to determine, so there's work ahead. As for my inventory plugin, RIS, I promised that I would be working on it, but in reality I haven't done much. and that's because it's been good enough for my current needs. So I've just been fixing bugs, and I'll be expanding on it gradually as my game requires more of it. I have in turn gotten started on my own ability system, RIS. An ability system is a unified framework for handling things like cooldowns, mana and stamina costs, as well as handling range checks, visuals, complex interactions, and server communication. While a small game might not need something like an ability system, as you can handle a fair amount in your main character class. But it becomes important as you reach a certain number of abilities, or you start having complex enough requirements and checks. Which certainly encompasses the ideas for my game, as I want to be able to support a smooth multiplayer PvP experience, which involves keeping track of client prediction and server rollback. I also looked into Gameplay Ability System, GAS, which is an ability system that comes packed with Unreal and is what is used in Fortnite. But I have found that it has a number of hard limitations that are not quite matching with what I want for my game. So I'm making my own system, optimized for Wartribes needs. Now, let's talk my YouTube plans. Feel free to skip forward if you're not interested in how I do YouTube. Sharing my development progress publicly is something I'm excited about, and a way to build up a community and maybe even a revenue source long term. I want to reach as many people who might be interested in my content as possible, and to do that I need to play the YouTube algorithm game. One core rule of YouTube is to not post a bunch of unrelated content on the same channel, so you end up with a segmented audience. In my case, that involves my unique approach to game development, progress updates on my game, as well as tutorials to help others. Viewers who are interested in one type of content might not be interested in others, and that can really hurt your YouTube growth and reach. Now, Shorts and TikTok are great for reaching a wide audience, but they can be even more dangerous. The reason is that when you first upload a video to YouTube, YouTube will first show it to your subscribers to see how they react to the content. Do they comment, like, and otherwise engage with the video? And if so, it will show it to a wider audience of people who might be interested in your content. And it'll continue like that to figure out how wide of an audience your video deserves. So the engagement of your subscribers is really important. So if you have some people who are only interested in tutorials and others in game updates, then you're gonna have a split audience, and that can really hurt your growth. This is especially true for people who watch your shorts and subscribe from there. Short form viewers are often less interested in long form content, so while they might have your long videos show up in their feed, they're less likely to click them. The YouTube algorithm doesn't seem to account for this, so it might think your video is not that great and show it to fewer people than it actually deserves. So that's why I've decided to split my YouTube channel in 3. This channel for sharing my game dev experiences and updates to Wartribes, a new tutorials channel called Unreal In-Depth, where I will cover more fundamental and in-depth subjects than I see on other channels. I've already uploaded the first of hopefully many videos over there, covering why and how you should be using the cheat manager in Unreal. So if that sounds interesting to you, head over there and check it out. Finally, I created dedicated channels on YouTube and TikTok for short form content. Splitting up my uploads like this is gonna hurt growth in the short term, but I believe in the long term it's gonna be the best thing for the channel. And I can mitigate some of the slowdown with cross-promotion, so check out the other channels if you're interested. Now I've been spending the last couple of weeks trying to get a snake out of a blender, so to speak. If I'm going to be pivoting into more horror elements, I need some scary things to go with it. And I made it my goal to try to create an Anaconda character model using Blender, ZBrush, and Substance Painter. It's been a fun, if not at times frustrating experience. I definitely feel like I learned a lot, especially in Blender, where I've reached a stage where I'm no longer afraid to just open it up and get started. I learned so much about topology, sculpting, and texturing. Two of the biggest challenges I had was 1, having to fix misaligned or duplicate vertices, and I learned you have to be very careful with your selections. And 2, weight painting, where I had some areas I simply couldn't paint for some reason. I eventually fixed it by realizing I had to add the weights for these vertices to one bone in order to remove it from the other. Getting smooth transitions between weighted areas was also a problem, but I eventually found the smooth weights add-on, and that helped a lot. I also did sculpting. Not so much on the general shape, but more on the scars and scales of the snake. I purchased some alpha brushes to be able to cover it in these awesome scales. These high poly details get baked into a normal map so that the low poly version can look more high definition. And the normal map can also be used to add depth to the color texturing. I really enjoyed the layered texturing approach in Substance Painter. And even after I had to replace the mesh, a lot of the layers just transferred over flawlessly. And using the normal map, we can procedurally have some areas be different than others. For example, I made the scales themselves be more shiny than the in-between areas, and to darken certain areas inside the mouth. I've taken notes along the way, and this is my updated workflow for how to work with character models. This is of course a work in progress that'll be iterated on, but I'll make sure to keep you guys up to date. Adding bones to something like a snake is not too hard, but adding animation, now that's the hard part. I first tried animating in Cascadeur, but due to the limited information about non-humanoid characters and my lack of experience, I didn't quite like the way it was going. So I moved into Unreal, where I could use the control rig solution. Unreal's control rig allows you to procedurally add various ways of animating your characters. I created controls for moving the body, opening and closing the mouth, aiming the head, and what I call a swallow control, making it look like the snake ate something. I can imagine a lot of gameplay possibilities being opening with this kind of thing. But I'm still early in the process and I don't have any final animations yet. I also introduced a new character model into the game, which was a can of worms, because as I mentioned earlier, I used the ALS Refactored plugin for the animation system. But this is based on the Unreal Engine 4 skeleton, and I want to use the skeleton for Unreal Engine 5. Unreal Engine's automatic retargeting framework makes this easy in theory, but I ended up with a lot of crazy distortions and weird jankiness in my first iteration that I had to contend with. What saved me in the end was a viewer linking a video explaining that additive animations don't get retargeted properly, and you have to go in and fix those manually afterwards. But I now have this new character model that I'm really happy with, though I might want to use my workflow to reduce the poly count eventually. Now, as always, I'm keeping up with the latest AI generation tools that can be used for game dev. I found this 3D modeling workflow that I really like. I managed to generate this shield from concept to in-game in just 10 minutes, and the quality was really impressive. Much better than what I've seen with previous tools like the Luma Discord server, in which I spent far too much time when that first came out. I haven't actually added the mechanics for the shield yet, so it's mostly a decorative shield for now. Now let's see what other stones have been added to the pile I call Wartribes development. I switched from the release to the source branch of Unreal. This means I can modify engine code myself, and it's also necessary in order to be able to build a standalone server for multiplayer. I've added shields, daggers and torches to the game, and a first iteration of stamina cost, adding some strategy to combat. I added a second set of line traces under the cursor, removing the need for precise clicking of objects when it shouldn't be necessary. There's also a first set of sound effects in combat, and although it's not much, it really adds a lot of depth to the game. I did some refactoring, moving some of the core interfaces from Blueprint to C++. A side thing I've been working on when I wanted to feel productive without actually being it is working on my own language I've been developing. It's called Kahama, and I won't go into too much detail here, but it sounds something like Kakioraki Obu Kyo Jaksema. And I'll be looking for ways to eventually integrate it into the game. So, what's next? I want to fix some issues while packaging where projectiles and some crafting stuff doesn't work. And I need to set up a workflow and finding people for playtesting my game, so I can iterate on my core mechanics in a way that's productive for the long term. If you're interested in helping playtest Wartribes, please check out the Discord server and join the playtest channel. Then I need to add the animations for the Anaconda, making it the river-dwelling, prowling predator that it's meant to be. And implementing the hunting and gathering I mentioned last devlog is also on the roadmap still. And then there's the big work of starting to plan out and implement the horror-themed prequel of my game. I want to start building out an island environment and see how close I can get to that feel and atmosphere that I want. But that will involve sorting through and processing all these environmental assets I've gathered up over time. I've created a separate project and a workflow for this purpose as well. If you have any questions or things you'd like to see, please don't hesitate to leave a comment below, hit like if you think I deserve it, and check out the other channels I've created. And that's all for this time. I'll slither my way back into Unreal and get back to work. See you in the jungle.